Hello and welcome to our presentation on Horacio Coppola's photograph Plaza de la República. Today we're going to be focusing on the question, how does Plaza de la República represent modernization in Buenos Aires? This is the photograph Plaza de la República. Horacio Coppola was born in 1906 to Italian parents. And he died in 2012. He was commissioned by the government to take photographs commemorating the 4th centenary of Buenos Aires. In these photographs, modernization was a key theme, used new and strange angles for 20th century photography, and there was a lot of movement within the photographs. Plaza de la República was taken on the inauguration of the obelisk. Just some socio-political context. Argentina had experienced immense economic and social growth due to the industrialization of the country, which led to the emergence of a large working class. This industrialization also brought mass immigration from Europe, which led to the emergence of new political ideologies such as unionism and anarchism. During this period, many forms of high culture and popular culture began to mix, creating new forms of art and cultural expression, photography being one of these. Before this, photography was merely a tool the state used to both control and make visible its territories and its bodies, as Brizuela writes. But it soon became widely available and considered both an elite culture and at the same time the first everyman's art, thus making it an emblem of modernization. During the 1930s, there was also some economic decline in Argentina after the removal of the radical government. And in 1932, civilian rule was reinstated and Argentina no longer had a military government.
This photograph by Coppola represents modernization in Buenos Aires through its focal point, the obelisk, and its connotations to modernization. This monument, built in 1936 and standing 71.5 meters tall, was completed in just 31 days, which is an architectural feat in itself and a reflection of the advancement in technology in the city. Furthermore, it sits on top of the 9 de Julio metro station that was built 1 year later in 1937, and another huge technological advancement, as it was the first of its kind, not only in Latin America, but also before Spain. This station and the metro system as a whole is still in use today, and for a modern observer of this photo, there's another tie to the modernization of Buenos Aires. The obelisk was constructed not only to commemorate the 4th centenary of the foundation of Buenos Aires, but also its definitive foundation in 1580, the inaugural rise of the national flag in 1812, and the federalization of Buenos Aires in 1880, with the inscriptions on each of the 4 sides representing one of these events. These 4 events, especially the federalization, are the foundation of modernization of Buenos Aires from the 1820s onwards, as the centralization of political power paved the way for many improvements to the city's infrastructure, such as the previously mentioned metro system, the tram network, improved drainage and sewage system, and more notably, the development of the Avenida de Mayo, linking the Plaza de Mayo to the Plaza de Congreso. Even to this day, the obelisk continues to be a focal point of not only modernization, but also the celebration of as society evolves. For example, thousands of people paraded around the obelisk after the 1886 World Cup victory, and once again, more recently in 2010, after the legalization of gay marriage in Argentina, which could be considered a movement of modernization within our society today. Coppola's photograph, therefore, represents modernization in Buenos Aires through this monument at the heart of the city. There's a symbol of modernization itself.
This photo clearly presents the grid of Buenos Aires, which the city expands around. The grid, associated with the radical modernization of a territory without cultural mediation that takes as its parameters the North American city, can clearly be seen in Coppola's work. Hence, this suggests that Buenos Aires is a city divided into organized, separate areas. However, interestingly, in the case of Buenos Aires, the grid is not a manifestation of the North American city, as it doesn't represent that which is most modern, but rather that which is most traditional. In this version, the grid suffers the ignominious destiny imposed by the Spanish tradition and by nature at the Pampa. Here, Coppola's picture demonstrates perfectly the framework of Buenos Aires, a city built with remnants of colonialism, and more specifically, deeply ingrained Spanish colonization. But it also is presented in the context of modernity and the experience of the neo-colonialism of the American empire, inspired by the growth of technology. One can also infer that this photograph, when analysed considering context, demonstrates the internal struggle of imposed culture and regulation, and that between the old and the new in Buenos Aires, as one can see clear representation of a colonial past and a desire to be considered modern. The relationship between modernity and the city can be seen as this picture presents the grid system as the very centre of the city, where the geometry of the new constructions coexist harmoniously with settlements of 19th century village. Here, the grid presents the struggle of modernity for Buenos Aires, the struggle between the desire to be seen as modern and culturally historical through their architecture.
This striking photograph captures a modernization of Buenos Aires through the way in which Coppola composed the image. Cavalli's suggestion that in much of Coppola's photography, the protagonist is the city itself certainly rings true in Plaza de la República, as the sheer size of the obelisk dwarfs all that it surrounds, doing much to draw attention to the monument. The masses at the foot of the obelisk, posed in a clock-like formation, work as leading lines, further directing the viewer's eye into the centre of the photograph. Here, Coppola accentuates the significance and grandeur of the newly built obelisk. It is a clear example of the brilliance of architecture and innovation in Buenos Aires as a result of modernization. The repetition of the lines of people in the clock-like formation evokes an image of order and control, whilst also creating a sense of rhythm, which brings the picture to life. Through this, the plaza, and Buenos Aires in general, is presented as a thriving and lively, but also respectable and ordered city, much like Paris, where ideas of modernization were rife. The modern city is juxtaposed with the obelisk in the centre, which has archaic connotations. On the one hand, Coppola could be reinforcing the idea that whilst innovation and change is occurring in the city, it's important to acknowledge the past. On the other hand, Coppola may have placed the obelisk in the centre, as it exemplifies a deep imprint that European influence had on modernization in Buenos Aires. This European influence is particularly significant as modernization was conceptualized as a foreign force.
In this section, we're going to analyse the symbolism in La Plaza de la República, and in particular in these four areas. Firstly, the arrangement of people at the base of the obelisk reminded us of the hands of a clock, particularly because this photo is taken from a high elevation. One interpretation of this is that it has always been the people of Argentina who have been the driving force behind social change and modernisation in their country, and that the clock dials made out of human columns represent their ability to shape their own future. This first quote explores how the opening of a large road, La Avenida de Mayo, contributed to Buenos Aires turning from a small hamlet into a large, bustling city during the 19th century. Roads such as these are also significant in the early part of the 20th century, with the increasing use of cars for transportation contributing to modernisation and urbanisation within the city.
Examines the way photography captured Buenos Aires through its period of modernisation during the 1930s and the 1940s, as well as the interwar period, where at that time there was a new wave of buildings and social modernisation. As well as other photographers, Sassien analyses Coppola's Así nació el obelisco, which documents the construction of the obelisk through film. Sassien discusses the idea that the construction of the obelisk marca un nuevo tiempo, with improved infrastructure and more goods and services being provided to the people of Buenos Aires. According to Sassien, the juxtaposition of materials and the way in which the obelisk was built represents the modernization of Buenos Aires, as it was a brand new way of building, and more. For Sassien, it marks the past and future through the spirit of the avant-garde, and signals a new era in a postmodernized Argentina. Finally, Sassine argues that the photography of the time was propaganda de la modernización urbana, realizados durante el periodo en que se construyó el obelisco. As Coppola was commissioned to take these series of pictures, it can be argued that it was a way of showing to the world the advancements that had undergone in Argentina.
This article critically examines Coppola's photography style and assesses who influenced his work and in what ways. 1931 marked a radical turn in Coppola's aesthetics. His photography took on the style of New Vision, a focus on the everyday and reality, and new objectivity, centering around social commentary. Cavalli asserts that rapid urbanization and modernization raised complex socio-political, ideological, and aesthetic issues, one of which was to redefine national cultural identity. These themes can be seen in Coppola's work as a Buenos Aires avant-garde, to which the photographer belonged, facilitated between the reformation of national culture and aesthetic renovation through the tenets of European avant-garde movements. While some of Coppola's earlier works are particularly unorthodox, Cavalli asserts that Vision Fotografica, the volume that Plaza de la República is part of, is far less experimental, though this may be because it was commissioned by the mayor of Buenos Aires, limiting Coppola's artistic autonomy to some extent, perhaps.